What is your neighborhood missing? Is it groceries or healthcare? Childcare? How about affordable homes or good public transportation? Is it vibrant commercial corridors or mixed use development? What else? What if the thing that is missing isn't entirely tangible? I live in Seattle, which is oftentimes considered one of the most progressive parts of the United States. I don't necessarily agree with that characterization, but America's really not that progressive anyway, so I'm not sure if it matters. We are a city with social services and solidarity-based organizations. We've got folks offering mutual aid. We have organizations building low-income, affordable housing. And we've even had some really great wins on the municipal governmental level. Things like workers' rights and tenant rights, more housing, participatory government, and a lot of other things. We have plenty of parks and green spaces and community gardens. We have dense neighborhoods, and we've got food pantries. However, none of these things are really intentionally connected. Most of our social services, for example, are concentrated in very small areas, far away from rich people, by the way, and are really not supported or funded or even connected to other organizations that do similar work in such a way that would help them succeed fully. Many of our neighborhoods are too pricey for a barista or a teacher or a construction worker. And the less pricey neighborhoods often don't have your essential services like groceries and healthcare, playgrounds, and mobility options for people who are non-drivers. These neighborhoods are also often isolated and cut off from the rest of the city by things like highways and industry and a lack of public transportation. Really, if anything has been done intentionally over the past several decades, it's the continued isolation of low-income people and communities of color from the rest of the city. So, what are we missing? Well, I want to tell you about a place that inspires me. Not because it's perfect, but rather because it's a city that is building a philosophy based upon providing the best standard of living for all of its residents. One in which leaders understand that they need to work to right historical wrongs and to build upon successes from the past. In fact, I think it's a place where a lot of North American cities can look and say to themselves, that can be us in 10 years if we put our mind to it. I'm talking about Nantes, the French sister city of my hometown of Seattle, where over the past few years, I've had the opportunity to spend a growing amount of time. It's a place that I've traveled to learn about land use policies and other urban projects, but it's also a place that keeps drawing me back over and over again, really due to a very tangible spirit of solidarity. From what I've seen, Nantes seems to be experiencing a social renaissance. And because of that, they've set some pretty ambitious goals. To become Europe's first non-sexist city by changing aspects of the built environment and also by pushing cultural changes to make people of all genders feel welcome in the city. To anticipate and combat gentrification and displacement by integrating social housing into new developments and all throughout the city. To rebuild their tramway network. Greening the city by expanding parks and bringing back natural habitats. And finally, just baking social well-being into city initiatives overall. And look, this is probably not unique to Nantes, but I have come to think of this kind of prioritization of social equity as Nantes urbanism. I want to show you an example of what I'm talking about. This is the Nouveau Quartier République, a neighborhood being built on the Ile de Nantes an area of the city that was once home to a rail yard for the National Railway SNCF. By 2030, this neighborhood will accommodate 4,000 new residents, and the local government is being very intentional as they design this neighborhood and how they want its residents to interact with it. From what I've seen, Nantes urbanism is rooted in this principle of mixité, or mixing, and it's taking part in developments and neighborhoods across the city in 3 specific ways. Starting with Mixité Sociale, or social mixing. The idea basically that everyone has a right to the city, regardless of their income level or their background. That means intentionally integrating social services into the neighborhood, like at this development, Cinq Ponts, where there is a day and night shelter for unhoused people and services on site. There's supportive housing, social housing, and market rate housing. There's also childcare and a sliding scale social restaurant. Oh, and I almost forgot. There's a farm on the roof, which is also a pretty cool way for people to get food in the nearby neighborhood. Then there's Mixité, Habitat et Travail, or mixing of homes and workplaces. So essentially, you don't have to work that far from your home. And this is really rooted in the idea of moving away from the 1960s notion of job centers and downtowns and commuting, and instead just building out a quilt of workplaces around the city. And then finally, there's Mixité des usages, or mixing of uses. And this is probably pretty familiar for most Americans. We might call it mixed-use development. And the mixed-use development on the Ile de Nantes, and specifically in the Nouveau Quartier République, is really exciting. For example, they specifically are going to be creating blocks that have 3 different kinds of housing. So detached housing, mid-rise housing, and high-rise housing. And throughout all of that, they plan to have 33% mixed income affordable social housing and 22% housing for purchase at an affordable price. So over half of the housing on each block is going to be made affordable to low-income and middle-income people. They strive to have at least 2 different kinds of workplaces on each block. So that can be anything from a bakery or a pharmacy or a secondhand toy store to an artisan or an atelier, or it could be a startup or a corporate office. And the rents for each of the spaces also correspond to the type of activity that is in them. There are schools or childcare centers or cultural anchors or recreational facilities on every block as well. And this idea of mixité becomes more and more obvious as you look at this proposed neighborhood, where they're creating spaces for neighbors to mingle and socialize at the center of each of these blocks, and where they are creating green spaces that just permeate every corner of the neighborhood. They're building new tramways and bus rapid transit and pathways for people in mobility devices or folks who want to walk or ride their bicycle, what the French call mobilité douce, or soft mobility. And they're doing this all via a series of Barcelona-style superblocks connected by these neighbor streets, which are car light streets, so folks can get around and do their day-to-day stuff in a low stress but pretty vibrant environment. There's just so much to unpack with the Nouveau Quartier République and the Ile de Nantes overall. I mean, it's a project 20 years in the making, and after it's all said and done, it will have been a project 30 years in the making. So If this is something that interests you, I highly encourage you to check out the project website, which I'll link to in the description. And if you can, I would also encourage you to visit Nantes and see the work that's happening at the Nouveau Quartier République. There's actually areas on the island and near the neighborhood where you can go and see what the neighborhood will look like in the future. And then just visit Nantes overall, and you can also get a glimpse of what the neighborhood is going to look like just by going around the city. For me, the most inspiring part about the Ile de Nantes and the Nouveau Quartier République is the city's very intentional goal of making it a place for everyone. From no income to high income, from long-time resident to first-time Nantais, you have a right to the city. You might be living in municipal social housing. You might be living in a house that you bought at a price that was kept intentionally low to keep the house affordable. You might be living in a market rate apartment, or you might be exiting homelessness. And chances are high that you're living in the same building, on the same floor, sharing the same walls. You might work at the grocery store around the corner, or be a teacher at the school next door. You may be a student at the university in the next neighborhood over, or a nurse who works at the hospital in the neighborhood. Or you might be getting into your first home after falling on hard times. No matter who you are, you can live here, and you can have access to resources, activities, and services that meet your individual needs. This is what we lack in many American cities, but we have the power to change that. You can advocate during your city's comprehensive planning process for land use policies that make it easier to build more types of housing and mixed uses. You and your neighbors can work together to run an initiative or work with an elected official to bring high-quality, mixed-income social housing to your city. You can participate in mutual aid, eviction defense, or other programs or services that break the stigma of being unhoused or being low income. And you can run for office or encourage others to do so. Nantes urbanism exists because of community participation, advocacy, and a united coalition government consisting of socialists, ecologists, and other local leftist parties who have been building this platform for decades. Because of this, Nantes urbanism feels like it stems from a philosophical decision as much as a land use one. And that is especially important in cities like my home of Seattle, who grapple with affordability, racial and economic inequity, and displacement. Now, obviously, there's no perfect neighborhood, nor is there a one-size-fits-all solution to inequity. And the examples given in this video may not work everywhere or for everyone. But what I have seen in Nantes, on the Ile de Nantes, in Bautière-Chênay, at the Caserne Méliné, and in many other neighborhoods does inspire me, and it does give me hope. In my opinion, the idea that everyone has a right to the city, that those with the greatest challenges deserve the greatest support, should be the core of any urbanist advocacy. So I hope that seeing this inspires you and gives you hope too. Because if they can turn this into this and make it intentionally for everyone, then maybe we can too. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, giving it a like, or leaving a comment. And if you want to learn more, you can also watch my previous video on living with low vision and no car in the United States.